Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last Product Tank of 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. So just a bit of background on Product Tank for those of you who don't know. So we started out in a pub basement and now we're in 200 plus cities all over the world. During 2020, we have been doing all of our product tanks online across the world, which is wonderful. So it means that you have access to hundreds of product tank talks. You just need to go to our Product Tank London or the Mind the Product YouTube channel, and you can see them from all across the world on a real variety of talks and topics. Mind the Products is the world's largest product community, and you can absolutely kind of take part still remote. So every year we hold a conference. We also have a weekly newsletter that you can sign up to. We have a website with lots and lots of articles, kind of helps, tips for all product managers. And then we also have a really active Slack community. You can also be a member of Mind the Product. There are a couple of different tiers, and on the different levels, there are lots of different things you get from that. So you get online AMAs with product leaders, instant video library access. On the higher tiers, you can even get matched with peers for kind of peer-to-peer discussions and learning. So we do encourage you to go and have a look at that. We also run remote training workshops on a variety of topics. So really encourage you to go and have a look at Mind the Product website and kind of learn more about those. On to today's event. So if you do have a question for our speakers and you're watching us on YouTube, log in and then click Show Chat, and then you'll be able to leave comments. We will be looking at those as we go. And it's great to see so many of you saying hi already. Hi to everyone. So we'll be looking at those as we go, and we'll be asking them at the end. There is a prize for the best question or questions asked in QA today, so we hope that you take part and leave some really good questions for our amazing panelists. So we are trying to make this one really interactive. So we are using Slido. We'll have a couple of polls as we go. Do sign up with that code. I'm going to slido.com. I'll leave this banner going for a little bit just so you can note down that number. And we'll also drop it into the YouTube comments. And now I'm going to hand over to Mark Abraham, who is our curator today. Mark.
Thank you so much, Sean. So first of all, thank you all for joining tonight for the Christmas party. We're going to finish off the year in style. And thank you so much for the esteemed panelists that I've got the honor to introduce tonight. So we've got Roshi, who I can imagine quite a few of you might already have seen at a Product Tank before, because she has presented at Product Tank previously in London. We've got Ed, definitely, 100% sure that you know Ed, who's a product manager, but also a volunteer extraordinaire at Mind the Product and Product Tank events. We've got Faris Aziz, who's a lead product manager at Bloom and Wild. Be interesting to hear from him later on about the impact of the virus in this crazy year on his business and his products. John Carman, same thing that I'm going to ask him later today. He's a senior product manager at Gusto. Joe Freeman works at the NHS, where he's a social and digital media lead. And last but not least, we've got, well, actually two people. We've got a large panel tonight. Caroline Clarkson-Lund, who's product director at Vouched4, and Alexei Zainin, who's a product manager at Go Kartless. So we've got a great panel. We've got some questions to kick off with, but I'm relying on the comments and your own interactions of things you want to throw in the mix, questions you want to ask this great panel, thoughts you want to share. One of the things I can tell you that I missed tonight, if I think back to the Christmas event that we did 2 years ago, when, don't know if some of you were there, if you remember Randy Silver in full-blown Santa suit. You're not going to get that virtually, and we as a panel, I can tell we've kept it fairly low key. So anything, if you've got a nice outfit on, Christmas jumpers, please share the comments, share pictures if you've got them. But we're going to kick off. First of all, I'm going to ask you, shall we start with our first poll, Sean? I think if we if you can start going to Slido whilst we're asking some questions, so we can go through the results later. Oh, that's up and running. So if you do that, I'm going to kick off with you. And if you could keep it brief, but just to introduce ourselves and get this conversation going, is I want to know about your highlight of this year. You see what I'm doing here? I'm not starting with the lowlights. We'll get to those. Highlights. Roshi, can I start with you? Tell me about your highlight.
Sure, yeah. So my highlight of this year was that I managed to successfully get a job during a pandemic, which was definitely not a certainty when I started job hunting. So I joined Altmetric in April of this year, and it's also my first time with a fully blown team of product managers. So it's been a really fun learning experience and interesting one onboarding remotely, which I'm sure we can talk a bit more about later.
We'll definitely come back to that. Thank you. Caroline, highlight for this year.
Yeah, so I guess for a bit of context, my highlight, Vouch4 is a review platform for financial advisors, accountants, and solicitors. So people who've been really important in terms of providing reassurance throughout the last few months. And I think my highlight was when very early on in the start of the pandemic, we realized we were actually getting a huge influx of reviews from people that were just talking about how wonderful their advisor was being during COVID and the pandemic. It's just so wonderful and heartwarming, just really nice validation of the great work those people do, but also just like a really human kind of reaction, I think, and really nice to see people kind of publicizing their advisors.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. John, tell us about your highlights. And again, I've noticed we're obviously very serious and we talk about business and products, but you could say, being able to go to the hairdresser after the first lockdown can also be a highlight. Just saying.
Not sure if that's actually just a hint. I need to actually get one now from lockdown too.
Who am I to speak about hair, right? Seriously.
I was just laughing at the what's the most common phrase, because actually probably my personal highlight is getting a puppy. So I've gone full lockdown bingo and achieved puppy status. I think flipping it back to kind of serious work and stuff. I think for me, so I mean, we've all probably seen hyper increased demand through this kind of crazy period, and I think Gusto's customer base kind of really accelerated towards our proposition. And for me, the teams we all kind of mass exited the office to start working from home, and the way that we've kind of really doubled down as a team and continue to solve amazing problems even remotely, and have kind of gone through some incredible kind of workload, but still have maintained a great sense of ownership and community in the company. For me, has been a real big highlight of actually just how well my team and the other teams at Gusto really work together.
Cool. Thank you. Ed.
Sure. Obviously, it's not been the best year ever, but I think for me, my highlight must be being a panelist on the Christmas Product Tank.
I'll pay you afterwards, Ed. We'll sort it out. Thank you for sharing your highlight. Joe, what has been your highlight?
Hi, there have been many. I think getting a permanent job at the NHS in the middle of a global pandemic is probably a highlight. I don't think I will ever work on anything so chaotic or important ever again. But I think one thing that I'm proud of, and I think is a real highlight, is looking at how we kind of embed social media and the feedback we get through our social content into product development, basically. I think that hasn't really happened within the team I work in before, but getting that added value from social and kind of contributing to that bigger development for me has been a massive highlight.
Thank you. Ferris.
Hey, everyone. So I think for me, the highlight has been the same highlight personally and professionally. I think this pandemic has amplify the importance of relationships. For me, I think it's brought me closer to some of my family and made me video call them, probably speak to them more frequently than I did before. And similarly, professionally, I think I feel a lot closer to my team and a few of it feels a bit more supportive, almost like before this kind of happened again. So I feel both personally and professionally, I feel like some of my relationships have actually been strengthened, which for me is a huge highlight.
Cool. Thank you. And Alexa, last but not least, your highlight.
Yeah, so I think I will repeat a little bit of what everyone has been saying. This has obviously been a pretty difficult year with all of the remote work, switching to working from home, people working with their kids nearby, all this stuff. And the highlight of the year for me that it may sound a bit cheesy, but that during this process, the company that I work with, Go Cardless, has been really supportive, and people has been really caring about each other and really humane. There were no kind of like hard feelings about all these transitions. People truly understood what it means for each other, and I felt that it's really great to be part of this team.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I'm not going to go around everyone because that might be a bit too painful, because we have to talk about the flip side of the highlights. And maybe if you want to share a low light, can be work related, personal life, but I'm curious. And then I saw the poll just sneaking in. We'll get to that, but we have to also look at some lowlights. So one of my, not lowlights, but my concerns sometimes I found, for instance, this year is that I'm worried that when I speak to people, it all feels very transactional, because you have to book in a slot and you have to have a Zoom call and you go straight to the point in the serendipity, or, you have to work a bit harder to, well, not even create the serendipity, but at least to have just normal human conversation sometimes. Anyway, that don't know if that counts as a low light, but I want to know, just have you got any low lights that you want to share? Rosie is.
Yeah, I can start. I was pondering. So as I said, I got a job in a pandemic, which was fun, but I have actually only met one of my co-workers in real life, and I've actually been working remotely for 3 or 4 years. And even when I was working remotely in the before times, I would still have had opportunities to meet these people in real life, but it's been 8 months and I haven't met my team. I've met my manager once for a socially distant coffee, so it has been a little bit weird, and it's been harder to understand those dynamics that usually kind of come quite naturally when you meet people in real life, and it's led to definitely some more difficult interactions, because I haven't met anyone. So yeah, it's been a bit isolating and a bit weird for sure.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else that has got Lola? Ed?
Yeah, I think for me it's also not seeing people, but for me it's not seeing family at all. Every year I go, this year I will go home and visit my parents more often, and then this year just not been at all. Losing a family member as well, and then not being able to go to the funeral wasn't a nice experience.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that puts everything in perspective, doesn't it? Any other low lights or things that you think, well, I can't wait for that to be something from history? Ferris, I can see.
Yeah, I was just thinking, for me, I find that if I have a bad day, things aren't going quite to plan, it can become a bad 2 days and then a bad 3 days. I find it a little bit harder to snap out of it. Like, there's no one for you to go for a stroll with, go for a coffee with, talk about it, for them to be like, you need to chill out, Baz. Like, what you're worrying about is really not that big a deal. I find that a little bit harder to kind of snap out that. So for me, that's a bit of a low light. And one of the biggest reasons I'm looking forward to the office is being able to, whinge at someone and get snapped out of it.
Nice. Joe?
Yeah, for me, I think the separation of work and home has been a bit of a challenge. So there's obviously been a lot happening, but I think the inability to put my phone down or my laptop away, I think when it's always so close to me, has been quite challenging. And I think that's always the way. I think with social media, I'm not very good at switching off, I think, and the nature of social means that you are always on and there's always something happening and you always need to be aware of something. But then linking in with product development teams across the NHS, building some impressive stuff in very short space of time, in extremely high profile, high pressure situations has meant that switching off has been difficult, especially when the stuff I'm working on is all over the news and is all anyone talks about. That's been challenging, I think. But And then also we were having building work done pre-lockdown, and so that had to stop. So I didn't have anywhere to work in a half-finished house with no kitchen. And there was a job interview at one stage during that while my wife had COVID back in April. So with 2 kids, so it was definitely challenging for sure at times.
Thank you all for sharing. And you've mentioned some things that we're going to come back to. Like Roji said, the kind of the team dynamics, especially if you're onboarding virtually. Interesting point you made there, Joe, about that work-life balance, and to Ferris's point as well, is how do you snap out of when work is not going to plan, which might be easier in a slightly more structured or office environment or more social environment. So we'll definitely talk about that. And before we go to the first poll and see what people voted for there, I would encourage people obviously to drop in any questions that you would like the panel to answer. Serious, fun, can be anything. This is a very much a two-way kind of session. But hopefully you've already heard some things that you might want to probe a bit more about or just delve a bit deeper. I would like to see the results of the first poll because I'm curious. Excellent, magic. 86%. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm on mute. But also the people who then persist. You're on mute. You're on mute. Anyway, pivot, super pivot, and more pivots. I would love to understand what a super pivot is compared to a regular pivot. Please ignore my dog in the background. Only 7%. You'd think there would be more people with cats, and maybe because it was just a dog. I don't know. John, with your puppy, has he been, featuring in any of the calls? Just a quick question. This is important stuff.
Many, both kind of on purpose and also just by complete accident. The amount of times that I think I've been on a call and suddenly have a shocked face across me where he's like sunk his teeth into my feet. I've kind of lost count.
I have to say, I like the last one as well. I'm just going to travel to Costa del Kitchen for a tipple or two. What do we do about, and this ties in nicely with the next question I was going to ask about, hilarious remote working stories. What do we do with people who are, that mute syndrome? Is there anything we can do? Like I can tell you, for instance, my youngest son, when he was in the first lockdown, obviously had to attend all these online classes. He created this massive "you're on mute" sign, which I think really resonated with people. Maybe it's kids for you, I don't know. Any other good tips to make sure that people are not on mute? Because I've been having complete monologues on my own.
I think pick your platform and stick to it. I think one of the problems we've had is that we've been trying to use so many different platforms, and the mute button's always in a different place. So you sort of my best remote working story actually relates to trying to use 2 platforms at once. So yeah, I think we need to keep it simple.
Thank you for that. Any other good remote working stories?
We did a team offsite, and we were trying to create breakout rooms. It was before Google had finally copied Zoom and put the the breakout room feature in there. And I copied in a daily LTMT capacity call session that half the team joined for a chat during a breakout room, and we all joined that session. So that was fun.
Nice. Alexei, any good kind of remote working stories?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to take the story about mute from a different angle. So we had a hackathon earlier this year, just shortly after the lockdown has begun, and one of the guys in the team has built a fully functional web prototype where you have most of the phrases that you actually need on Zoom in real life, and you can just click a button and it says exactly this phrase. It saves a lot of energy and a lot of effort. I'm going to share this link afterwards. It's immensely useful in all of the Zoom conversations.
Did anyone, because these are fairly innocuous and I'm not forcing you to say anything, but did anyone see was it one of the Saatchi brothers who was staying at his girlfriend's, basically? She was on a call and he just got out of the shower, basically, butt naked, while she was on a video call? Look it up. Amazing.
There is actually a lot more to my story, which is along similar lines. So we were trying to use, for some reason, we were trying to do this pub quiz where everyone was in a team in a Google Meet, but also in a group chat on a Zoom. And someone in my team left the Zoom, forgot to leave the Google chat, and then getting changed for his run in full view of everyone.
A good look. It's a good look. It's so 2020. Amazing. The next Slido poll is live, so we'll get to that shortly. So I would encourage you, use the code. You can see it really nicely going through your screen for the next poll. But I wanted to ask, how do you, because you alluded to it earlier, how did you stay connected, or were there challenges in staying connected, not just to your team, but the wider business or even customers working remotely, not being in an office? Any tips or any things that didn't work so well?
We did a fairly basic thing where we just extended our stand-ups at the beginning of and just basically chatted for 10 minutes. So we felt like some people obviously really like that, some people less into it, but it at least gave you the opportunity to do that if you wanted to. Some people maybe live on their own. A few people I knew that were just totally on their own for like quite a while. So having that little bit of chit chat was really, really helpful. And I think connecting to the wider business, like people talk about over communicating quite a lot, but I think for me that was a really big theme as well. Just quite relentlessly over communicating and thinking like, who have I perhaps left out? Who have I not bumped into the kitchen and mentioned something about? And make sure you like proactively go and contact them.
Anyone else, any experiences or lessons learned in terms of that connectedness?
I think for us, we've become very quick to Miro things. So it doesn't have to be Miro, it can be anything like that, but we really have taken to Miro, and where perhaps we might wait to sort of formalize things before trying to work it out visually like that. We're basically using it like we would previously have used the wall in the office, and just like, okay, just bung a bunch of post-its and everyone start typing, and it's complete chaos, but it's the kind of chaos that we're sort of trying to replicate, the chaos that you would get in a brainstorming session in the office. And while it has been hard doing it so much and just sort of being in a meeting and talking something through, and you're like, no, you know what, I'm just going to draw it on Miro and just draw a really terrible diagram or something. So representing things visually and trying to find that way of the sort of moving things in space that you would get from a wall has been, I think, really valuable for us and has helped us kind of keep going with the things we would normally be doing.
Excellent. Anyone else? Any insight?
I was just gonna second what Faz was saying about doing a stand-up in the morning with your team. I've not been working this year, but for the year and a half previously, I was working from home, only 8 of the entire company, and you just felt so am I the only person here? Is anybody else working right now? I just don't know. And I don't know what they're actually working on. Having a daily stand-up would have been a really great thing for us to have done during that time period.
Gotcha. It's interesting on Ferris's point, because we got someone saying, I work with Faz, and I can confirm it's more like 30 minutes chatting rubbish and 5 minutes standing up at the end. It's great. But I think that goes to the point as well of not just having these kind of transactional conversations where it's just about, very business straight into it, which that was one of my questions, which we haven't necessarily touched on. But how do you, for instance, have one-to-ones, or you sit with people and I know what you're saying, Roji, about having a mirror board and that's so great. But previously we would have had a coffee and sitting down and talking things through, maybe getting a bit more context about problem space. How have we been doing that the last couple of months?
It's a good one, because I was thinking about this the other day. It almost feels like one-to-ones have gone purely transactional. So you have to kind of have to make a conscious point of going, right, actually, let's just try and have this as like an organic conversation, and then we can talk about kind of where we are with a particular outcome we're trying to drive. So, yeah, I found that like that the natural kind of how are you, how's things, always becomes like a point that needs to be made. And I miss that kind of I guess like organic way of having one-to-ones.
Any other kind of learnings in terms of that connectedness?
We've done something that I think has worked really well, actually, and it's just like a nice social thing. But every Friday we do a whole company. We started off doing quizzes, and then we got quite bored of quizzes, and so then we just reverted to loads of random other games. We've had like some of our developers have like built a game for the whole company and just kind of gotten more and more inventive. But actually, it's been just such a nice way for everyone to keep in touch and just have that kind of proper social time.
Gotcha. And on that note, we talked about the social aspect, and Roshi, you touched on it. How have you found, I guess, both the hiring and the applying for new jobs and the onboarding? So I'd love to hear some examples of maybe if you recruited someone over the last 9 months or so, and that obviously was very super virtual, or you've been the candidate and you've been going into a new job, or you're looking for roles and you've been interviewing remotely. What have been the experiences there?
For me, I started the application process sort of prior to things descending into madness in the UK. So I sort of started the application process in February, and it started with a video call because Altmetric were already part remote. But the intention was always first couple interviews online and then going into the office for sort of final interviews. And the CEO went away on holiday for a couple of weeks and then came back, and we were like, should I be going places? And we were like, oh no, let's maybe just play it by ear. And then my final interview was like the day after the first lockdown in the UK. So it was sort of dominated by that. And it was weird. I think it was helped by the fact that Altmetric already had a bit of a remote culture, so it wasn't quite such a extreme change for them. But onboarding was really weird because there was a little bit of sort of dead air in there. So you would have your onboarding activities, and then the place at which you would normally like go for a coffee with your new team or go out for lunch or have a chat was just sort of me sitting in my room with my cat being like, what do I do? What is this?
I totally hear you, and that makes me think. I'm going to open it up also. I would love to see a lot of comments, because I'd like to think over the last 9 months that we have at least learned how we can onboard people in a semi-normal kind of way, and maybe remove, what did you call it, Roshi, the dead air?
Yeah.
So I would encourage people, leave a comment if you got any tips for us, or if you want to share with the community of how you've, dealt with that onboarding challenge, because I can see how that's really real if you're your candidate, and normally you get a lot of comfort from meeting people, having coffees, and suddenly you're still stuck in your own seat and going from one to the next. Anyone has been looking for roles and interviewing and wants to share about that? Ed?
Yeah, about the same time as Roshi, I was interviewing at quite a few companies. Some of it's my fault. Like, I took on, I think, 10 interviews across a 10-day working period, and it was so exhausting doing that and doing it on a video call at the same time. Like, the video call, you have your cognitive disconnect with dissonance or something, where it makes you tired than doing things in person. Yeah, it was not a fun experience. Definitely prefer to do these things in person instead.
Did you see any? I hear what you're saying, Ed. Did you see any good practices, or think, okay, my interviewer or the company made the best of a not so great setup in terms of making me feel comfortable, even though it was remote, or anything that stood out?
Yeah, I think we were often having a nice, a friendly chat for the first 5 or 6 minutes before we actually got into the actual main part of the interview, just to kind of, I guess, get to know each other a little better, just to kind of like, I guess, maybe calm nerves and just relax a bit.
Cool, thank you. And anyone who's actually been growing their team or have been hiring people, what have you found the last kind of 9 months or so in that process?
Yeah, so I've hired 3 people into my team over this period. So two of the team I fortunately got to meet in person through the interview process, but then their entire onboarding experience was completely remote. And one of the team, he joined, we interviewed, and we only briefly, we've met in person once. The interview process kind of online has been, it follows a similar process to what we do in person. I guess like the whiteboarding activities, the product problem solving, that's been interesting. Lots of different whiteboarding technologies that have been used. But I think for me, the biggest challenge that I found with it is the kind of the personal kind of conversation that you would have in an interview. And it's quite hard to judge, say, like how someone is kind of like the body language and how their kind of emotion is coming through interviewing, because it's all quite just kind of a box. You've got a 4x2 box of someone's face, and that's what you see for like a majority of time. So that's been quite a challenge to kind of go through that process and build up like a kind of rapport of kind of putting a candidate at ease, for example, during the process.
And I would quite like to build. I was just looking at some of the questions that are coming through, and I think this question is a nice extension of that. And maybe if I can start with you, Caroline, because the question is, how has your leadership style or your personal style changed since this shift to remote first working? So how has your leadership style or how you interact with people changed, or not? Maybe.
It's a good question. I mean, if I'm honest, I think in terms of kind of core style, I don't think it's changed too radically. It's more things like how we communicate and how you keep the team kind of motivated and upbeat. That's been the challenge, right? I think we've talked a lot about people feeling a bit isolated. You know, a lot of our team who are younger trying to work from flat shares with 5 other people, or people who are trying to homeschool whilst trying to work. There's been so much going on that it's how do you check in with everyone and make sure that they're still feeling okay. And I think one of the things that's been really important for us is we've done a lot of just open sessions, just asking people how they're doing, what's going on, how's their well-being, like how are they feeling? I think that's been one of the most important things to do. That, and then I think, you know, we've talked about communication and the challenges of being remote. I think it's just, I think Faz said it, you can't really over communicate enough. It's just like any channel, like calls, video chats, Slack, like just everything, just keeping in touch as much as possible, making sure people feel included.
Thank you, Caroline. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I think I kind of echo a lot of what Caroline said, really. And I think there's something to be said about kind of bringing your whole self to work, which I think me and my team have probably found a bit easier over kind of working remotely and doing that virtually. I think we're all kind of introverted within my team and actually the wider team as well. And as a team of people as well who are used to engaging across social media and talking to people kind of virtually, it's kind of been not, I wouldn't want to speak for them, but I feel like it's not been too much of an issue. And I think we've probably actually bonded more as a team through what's happened than we would perhaps actually face to face in the office. And I think sometimes for some people, those interactions of chatting through Slack or calls on Teams stuff actually are that little bit easier. But I think there's definitely something to be said for kind of being more open and honest about your feelings and the situations that you're finding yourself in. I'm definitely finding myself checking in with them more often and making sure they're okay. And something I think I need to do more and should have done more is making sure that they're switching off and actually taking a break and taking that time. I think we've all accrued a lot of annual leave because we've not taken it because we've been busy and we're just at home anyway. So it's not like I'm going to go anywhere, so I might as well be working. But I think so building that in is something that I'm trying to do a lot more of, and especially kind of over Christmas, whilst also trying to give myself time off whilst letting them take some space.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting because that comment that Faz started with in terms of over communicating, it got an interesting question and a suggestion as well. First of all, I'm going to suggest share the comment actually where recording training meetings so we could always go back to the training meeting, the recording of it if we got stuck. And a nice one as well, where someone said also walking meetings can work to break up the day, water cooler social chats too. But the question was really, when we talk about over communicating, whether that's with our team, can even be just checking in, or stakeholders, other people that we work with across the business or outside of it, whether we just checking in or having more kind of specific conversations. The question is, what do you do to avoid that people drown in meetings? Alex,
is it okay to say that I'm drowning in meetings?
Well, maybe if you enjoy it, right? But how do you, maybe if I can start with Alexei, because I know because how do you, again, to the point as well, I think that Joe made about switching off. I can imagine even during a working day, I don't know, maybe some people like it. I don't know. Personally, I really need some space. I'm not a meeting person anyway, but particularly now that you just can't move from one room to the next necessarily, and if there's lots of meetings, it can get full on. What is your view on that, and what have you picked up?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things here that were useful for us. First one is that we kind of try to enforce the culture where we try to minimize the meetings where the thing could be resolved in a chat, and therefore we kind of just have been freeing people up from the Zoom fatigue. But this thing you have to be very careful with, because as a lot of people have already mentioned, you have to over communicate being fully remote. So there is very delicate balance between these two things. But the other thing that has been actually extremely helpful and has been picked up by almost the whole company now, or at least a couple of people I work with, is that we have meeting-free days when people actually can recharge, relax, do some deep work without these constant interruptions, and focus on what they think is the most important for them.
Thank you for sharing it. And Rosie, I know I cut you off when I talked about drowning in meetings. Do you drown in meetings?
Oh yeah, it's just not a solved problem for me at all. I will often also take on meetings in order to free my team up from said meetings. So we have also instituted meeting-free days, but I do sometimes find myself taking the hit and doing meetings on meeting-free Fridays, because our customers don't know that we have meeting-free Fridays. So sometimes by necessity it happens anyway. So yeah, definitely happy to hear tips as well.
I think afterwards, because the question and the suggestions around recording training meetings or going for a walk and talk came from Chris Perrin. So Roshi, you should talk to Chris afterwards. He might be a good person. Let's magically look at the results from the second poll. I feel a bit like I'm at the Eurovision Festival. All right, best features released this year. Right. Panel, what do we think? Background blur on Google Meet is the winner. What is the background blur on Google Meet? That's on Teams as well, right? No? Is that with the 3 dots and then everything is just, you can't see it? Is that what we're talking about here?
Kind of creates a bokeh effect behind you. So you look super edgy. It also heats all your fans up on you.
I've noticed that. I love the people. That makes me happy when I see my colleagues and they're on the beach. That really, anyway, that would be my best feature. I can order for the table without without admitting it was me. That got 30%. Would you believe it? I'm firmly in the Zoom camp. 17%. Right. If we had to choose Zoom or Teams or any other winner. Panel, just very brief.
Teams.
Zoom for me.
Ooh,
Zoom.
Why Zoom? Because Zoom is clear 70%, and you're saying Zoom predominantly. Why Zoom over Teams or any other kind of remote working or conversation tool?
It is the hand I have been dealt.
Oh, that's such a... Any features, any specific aspects that we like better if we had to compare and we were very critical?
We've been using Zoom with actually with our customers running webinars and that kind of thing. And I just find it the best for that, because you can do the like reactions and you can mute people, and I don't know, I just like it.
Cool.
So we've been doing some like feel good Friday things at Gusto. So I think we're building a community, and Zoom has a feature where you can broadcast studio audio through from your laptop. So anyone who's an aspiring musician, Zoom's your one for live audio.
Good one. I feel that Teams, maybe it's just my machine, but it feels like it really blows up my machine basically, and it starts slowing. Anyway, interesting, because we got people saying here, Hangouts all the way, says Goop Station. Zoom's design kills it for me. Teams overcomplicates a simple task. I can see that. Hangouts is from Luca. Bavik is also saying go for Hangouts, whereas Leonardo is saying Zoom. Excellent. Good, because building on that, I would like to talk a bit more about collaboration. And we touched on that when we talked about how are we connecting with others. But I think, Roshi already introduced a new verb, which is, what did you say, Roshi? To mirror. But
To mirror.
To mirror, yeah, no, it's a good verb, seriously. Are there any do's and don'ts that you've picked up in terms of, collaborating, again, whether it's with the people in the team that we're part of, or customers, or people across the business?
I think for me, one of the big learnings about the pandemic and like collaborating remotely has been allowing time to just have a chat that not necessarily results in something super productive being produced, but perhaps like clarifying your thinking or bouncing an idea off someone. That's for me like the most interesting and useful part of collaboration, is when you organically have that discussion, feel like that thought you had in your brain wasn't completely mad, and you've like discussed it and maybe fleshed it out a little bit more with someone else. But perhaps the end of the meeting isn't something that's like ready to go or ready to take to someone, but it's just kind of a replication of what we did have in an office. I found those like really
John,
energizing.
any thoughts or tips in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of covered Miro. That's definitely one that I've found like super useful with the team. I think as well. So I personally invested in one of these like Wacom graphics tablets for drawing. That's kind of satisfied my like the visual side of whiteboarding. But yeah, I think making time to kind of share ideas, to actually break up the conversation, so it's not purely just outcome, it's like what's our thinking, and then leveraging our whiteboarding tools, etc., to kind of get to drive conversation is been particularly useful. And drawing people in during meetings is really easy when you've kind of got a group of 10 or so people on a meeting, and a couple of just talking heads, actually asking kind of everyone's open questions and trying to draw people into the conversation, which would be more organic if you're in person, is also something I've tried doing much more of.
Because on that note, and I think Roshi mentioned it, team dynamics, especially if things are not going so well, or I can see that me and Ed, we love each other at the best of times, but we've both had a bad day, and John is trying to sort out, or Roshi is trying to step in. Any thoughts on that in terms of team dynamics, collaboration, particularly if you have little battles or differences of opinion?
I think big learning about that has just been like nip it in the bud, because it's the kind of thing that if you keep quiet about, or let tick over for a few weeks. I mean, it's the same in an office or not, but it's the kind of thing that you would normally perhaps go and just speak to someone and take them aside, but doing it remotely feels a little bit more like intense almost. But I definitely would advise anything like that, just nip it in the bud.
Cool. Any other thoughts on how those kind of team processes, working together, collaboration?
I think one of the important dynamics that sort of went missing from our company was between teams. So particularly, we're quite a small business and we're all in the same office. So classic situation of someone in the customer success team has a customer on the phone. They're like, oh, they're stuck on this thing. I don't know what to do. They might normally run over to me or someone and go, oh, help. We've sort of missed that. And actually, it's kind of forced us to get much, much better with our internal processes. and how we handle things like customer issues or bugs or that kind of thing. And so what we've done is actually put in place a series of values first. Things like we fix every bug, or no customer left unhappy, or whatever it is, and then translate that into digital tools that we can use to manage that process, because you can't look over and check if someone's free to help or whatever. So we need a process in place to be able to kind of raise that, make sure that someone's going to look at it and respond to it, And so I think it's actually been quite great in terms of putting in place lots of pillars that will help us scale in that way.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, our final poll is up. So please, if you haven't gone to Slido just yet, please do that. And we'll come back as a panel later on. Before we do that, I just wanted to ask you a question, because we talked a lot so far about things we had to do without over the last 9 months, or where we had to improvise. But equally, and I think we've read something by Barry O'Reilly, who's been talking about the pandemic as this is a really difficult word for a foreigner to say, as almost like an accelerator of things that might already be happening, started happening way before, but suddenly, because of the circumstances, got accelerated. Have you got, over the last 9 months or so, picked up any examples where you think that's true, or maybe some examples where that's false? Your own products, outside of your own business, or anything you observed there?
So I feel like a bit of an imposter here, because I don't have kind of product manager in my title. But what
you're not.
But what? So I was on a contract before I got a permanent role within NHS Digital, and my contract role was to kind of look at the structure of the team and look at what they deliver and how ideally that could be improved going forward. And I think what has happened with the pandemic has that kind of the vision that I kind of laid out for how this team should operate and the role they should play within NHS Digital has sped up hugely. So in the past, the kind of the social media element and digital marketing element of what the NHS website team did was just broadcasting content. Basically, they would support big public-facing health campaigns with massive budgets, but social media can add so much more value to just broadcasting content. And so, I kind of came up with 4 pillars, all of which escape me now, apart from kind of visibility and data being 2 of them. But we've certainly become more visible as a team, and for the first time I've had kind of a role within my team being present within product development calls and meetings. So when teams have been building first iterations of test and trace models and vaccine stuff, which is kind of my life at the moment, we've had a seat at the table, and we can kind of contribute one set of really valuable data that you can then add into your wider user research and your other product development kind of stuff that goes on, to actually then build something that is really, really fit for purpose. And then the whole role of social in content design to support that product development as well is really, really fascinating, and kind of building those processes so that we're able to very quickly feed back live information from social into a product. And for me, that's fascinating. And I don't think that would have happened as quickly had the pandemic not happened. So I've got big hopes for 2021. I think.
Thank you for sharing. And briefly, anyone else who picked up on any trends that maybe got accelerated or others that didn't?
So Altmetric is a company that works in the education space, and we track attention around scholarly research. And it has been really, really fascinating watching the way that science is shared has changed, and the sort of increase in sort of science literacy amongst non-scientists, and just the sheer volume of sort of content. So we track attention across kind of news and social media and in policy documents and patents and things like that. And in March, we actually hit our cap of tweets that we would, our capable of collecting, because the volume and the scale of the research socialization on social media had grown by such an amount that we sort of had some scaling challenges that we had to contend with that we didn't expect, because there was just this explosion of people caring about research and people caring about the data behind things. And that's been really interesting, watching how laymen kind of navigate a very almost sort of closed ecosystem. The research ecosystem is quite impenetrable for people who maybe don't have a university education. I don't have a university education. And so it's been fascinating watch that transition, and also sort of watch how sort of funding bodies and NGOs and researchers themselves are changing the way that they work in order to sort of meet the new challenges. It's been really interesting.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting. Kept a close eye on the comments, and Carl says, I'm hoping that now that we know it's possible, more people will start to use online meeting tools and reduce air travel. Good one. So yeah, that could be something that gets accelerated, or travel in general. Carl adds to that. So for the final bit of this session tonight, I want you to take your kind of virtual crystal balls out, because we're going to look at the next year. But before we do that, I'd love to see what people think about next year. So if we could get the last poll up, that'd be great. What do you think? 67% of people are optimistic. Hope in the darkest times, 21%. I don't want to talk about 2021, 13%. Again, no one seems to be talking about pivots or super pivots and more pivots in the next year. So there won't be any pivots by the sounds of this, poll. But on a more serious note, so, let's say we are optimistic. We had some good questions here where looking forward, like one question here says, what positive changes would, and I don't know who I can attribute this question to, but what positive changes would you like to continue? That's Haley, James says. Thank you, James. Haley asks, what positive changes would you like continue in the workplace once the world is COVID free? So things that we're actually saying, I want to see those continue in 2021 in the workplace. John, any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, Haley, hey Haley, Haley's in my team. Good question. So, what positive changes do I want to see in the workplace? I think I'd like to see us kind of being much more, or continuing to be really engaging in all meetings. So where we're kind of actually having to, as I mentioned earlier, kind of be conscious about making sure everyone's getting like a chance to speak in meetings. I think where we probably we may have like a split view of kind of maybe people working from home and people being in the office. Actually, I really want to kind of see the continued change of kind of people being fully engaged in meetings, and making sure we're giving everybody the time to think and speak and engage.
Thanks, John. Anyone else, any kind of, particularly from a workplace perspective and how we work with each other, things that you'd like to see continue next year?
I think one really nice thing that we've started doing is, again, it comes back to changing dynamics, but usually if someone achieved something in the office, their team would kind of know, because they'd overhear the call or see the sales go through or whatever, and they'd go, nice one. Actually, we've started doing that virtually. So whenever someone kind of achieves something, no matter how small it is or whatever, we call it out to the whole company on Slack, and everyone gets in and like celebrates and that kind of thing. That's just it's a really nice thing to do, and I think we should keep that kind of thing going.
And interesting, because there seems to be, which is great to see, that there's a lot of optimism for next year. But then there's a question, and I'm not sure who the question came from, but the question is like, how can you plan for next year given the global uncertainty? And someone else built on that question by asking, putting COVID aside, we've seen the most uncertainty in decades. Has uncertainty permanently changed how product managers should approach product strategy, roadmap, vision? So are we saying next year we're just going to go va-bank and we're going to see what happens? Freestyle. Faz.
I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's always really, really hard to predict what people are going to feel in the future, or trends that are impossible to predict. But I think what we could probably guess is stuff that we're seeing amplified in COVID will probably continue, I think. So I mentioned like strength of relationships, like digital products that help people connect or enable connections or amplify those connections, I think are going to be the theme of 2021. And I think you'll start to see businesses weave those into their product strategies. Bloom Wild, for example, so that it's a really, really interesting, unique way to be able to connect with someone. You can send someone a beautiful bouquet of flowers or plants through the letterbox, personalize the gift card. That kind of stuff has really enabled people to connect in a really, really difficult time. And I think that's going to carry on into 2021. And I think the winners in business and products will be the ones that really double down on that.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to add to that or build on that? Whilst I get myself sorted before my computer explodes. If not, I want to, because there's one topic that we did talk about, but we haven't really, if we're saying, yeah, we're going to continue remote working, and there were some questions earlier about, is remote working a thing that's here to stay? How do we deal with that work-life balance? Because some of you pointed out in this conversation already, like, if that's the case, then we still need to be very conscious that some people do have trouble switching off and it gets too much. Ed?
I was going to say that for me personally, I like working from an office, but I also have the benefits of working from home as well, in terms of there's a lot less interruptions going on. So I'm kind of hoping that we will see a situation where maybe we'll work from the office for 3 days a week, then work from home for 2 days a week. And also just in terms of I don't miss commuting at all. Like commuting on the underground 5 days a week was just a nightmare. But yeah, in terms of being at home as well and working when you're at home, I live in a small flat. I've got maybe 3 rooms in total. So, I can't just finish work and then go and be somewhere else. I close my laptop and I'm still just in my living room. So I think people have to get better at getting outside more often. So for me, I was making sure that I got outside, say, at least once a day. One of our panelists today was saying about having, I think one of my questions actually was saying about having walking meetings and that kind of thing. Just making sure you get outside, get some fresh air. Yes, don't get cabin fever.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And is there anyone who wants to, again, share their experiences or people that you've worked with in terms of finding that balance, especially if this is a thing to stay, that's here to stay? Caroline?
I think there's kind of 2 things. One, being disciplined with yourself. I think at one point I actually had to just write on my wall, like, finish work at this time and leave the house. But then I think it's also, like you said, like sharing ideas with everyone in terms of what everyone's getting up to. So, our CTO goes for a cycle every morning, which, even though I have a bike, haven't occurred to me, just like around the neighborhood, and just kind of, bouncing ideas off of each other and finding out different things to do. Because I think it gets very boring if you're trying to do the same activity every day and that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of sharing ideas. On the walking point, even if you can't walk together somewhere out in the open, you can also both be on the phone but walking. So, yeah. Which I thought was genius when someone in my team came up with it, and I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So I think it's, just sharing ideas.
Excellent. So I know we're going to go a bit over, but it's nearly Christmas, so we should, because I'm going to ask people, and the question about uncertainty came from James, or Andrew, sorry. And the reason I'm saying that, because I invite people, if you want to vote for a question, someone who think, that asked a brilliant question that should get a prize, and these are very special prizes that we pull together as a organizer team, please drop it in the comments. Otherwise we'll pick some. We'll do our own very democratic process. But if you have any strong views on Andrew's question about uncertainty was great, or Haley asked a fantastic question, please let us know. But on a final note, whilst we get people to think about what the best question was, and then Sean, maybe you can tell me which one we're going to go for. I want us to be very honest. This is the most honest moment of the whole session. You've already been super honest, and I really appreciate you shared good things, bad things. Thank you so much. But I want to tell you, and I also want to ask people in the comments to write down your average attention span. So I'll start 2 minutes. And then I wonder if it's not gripping enough. So please let me know, both in the comments, but also you guys on the panel. Roshi, I'm going to start with you. I'm curious, how long is your average attention span?
Probably about 13 seconds. I am a perpetual multitasker. Yeah, so very,
Who
very
is going to be
short.
13 seconds, either on the panel or in the community?
I'm gonna try to give it a go. Just this morning, I've been reading a Slack message, someone replying to my question, and then I read and ask a follow-up question, and then I realize the answer to this follow-up question was in the end of the previous answer, which was 2 lines long, which probably brings my attention span to 6 seconds or so.
Ooh, Roshi, you got competition. Joe.
I think I'm probably down to like 3 seconds. So just to try and win. Yeah, I think looking at the kind of average attention span to social content is, in terms of video stuff, has not really shifted from what it was pre-pandemic, really. We're seeing a lot of engagement and interaction on content because people have got a lot of stuff to say, which is both good and bad. But yeah, I think that one of the real challenges for us around kind of content is listening to what people are saying and then build that into our content plans. And that has driven engagement, I think, on Facebook by nearly 900% in the past 9 months or something ridiculous, which has presented a lot of challenges in terms of scaling resource. But ultimately, it's just been really challenging to still get that cut through when there's so much stuff out there about certain subjects. When you're trying to push really important public health messages, you need to kind of break that 3 second barrier. But I do find myself seeing stuff on social and just switching off, not of my own content, of course.
Of course. And I'm just, I'm looking at the rest of the panel because I'm hoping that someone will say, no, 10 minutes. What are you talking about? 3 seconds? Nope.
So what are we talking about?
Yeah, what's the attention span?
Because tell me quite honestly, I'll be more direct, because who has been in a meeting and been reading a book during a meeting? No one else? Yeah.
That's just you.
Maybe that's just me and my attention span. Anyway, but
So I was wondering if you're just about to tee your own book
No,
up there,
I'm
Mark.
not.
That's like the perfect segue.
Thank you for doing that, but I'm not. No, but no, I'm just curious. And on a serious note, again, this is my serious face. Are there any things that we can do to? Because it's fair to say that short attention span is not something which is specific to having lots of meetings or being remote or being isolated and stuff. But how do we, particularly, it's definitely been brought to the fore, I guess, for some people more than others. How do we manage that? Especially because we need to be concentrated, when we're speaking to someone or we're trying to solve a problem.
I think one of my biggest challenges was just the sheer number of communication channels that I've got open at any given time. So you're having a meeting, you've got Slack open, your phone's next to you, you've got your email open on a different tab. And actually just what I had to start doing was quitting everything except the one thing I wanted to focus on at that particular moment. Otherwise, slacking while you're in a meeting and it all just goes wrong.
100%, absolutely. I deliberately turn those things off as well, or blocking out time and really focusing, or just even reminding people why we're in the meeting for, and if not, then let's go away and do read that book, or do something else. Any other tips on that concentration management?
Yeah, so don't look at the news during the day. It's going to be horrific anyway, but leave it to the end. Because I was always getting distracted by just load the BBC or something like that and just see what's going on for like 5 minutes between two tasks, and then you get distracted and it's.
I've turned all notifications off, so no sounds, no banners, anything like that, and that's helped. Also, just the social dilemma shocked me into doing that as well. So.
Excellent. Before I thank you all for being on the panel and your great contributions, because I'm aware of time and that we've got a prize to award for the best question, right? First, can I just award the prize for the best animal on tonight's event? Where is your cat, Roshi, when we need him or her?
It's a she. She is currently sitting on the speaker beside my laptop, staring directly into my soul.
And just so we have it on tape, what's the name of your cat?
That is Noms Chomsky.
Cool. Well, I'm sure we can find, we're Mind the Product, we're Product Tank. We can do something inventive here. But it looks like, and I'm just checking all the comments and trying to be a good host, is that Haley's question, which was, what positive changes would you like to continue in the workplace once the world is COVID-free? That was her question. She has won the prize for best question, as voted for by everyone. So thank you, Haley, for that question. But panel, Ed, John, Caroline, Alexei, Faz, Joe, and Roshi, thank you so much for joining tonight, having a bit of fun, being serious, reflecting, looking forward, sharing ideas, sharing examples. This is our last Product Tank of tonight, and I'll close it off if that's all right with everyone. But I'm just going to do a virtual kind of clap, and hopefully people in the comments will join me on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining tonight and sharing all your thoughts, answering questions, and freestyling with me. Thank you.